Now, a meeting of G7 nations on the environment is due to start in Paris, but climate change has been left off the agenda. The move comes as France seeks to avoid a row with the United States, Paris opting to prioritize G7 unity in order to protect the grouping. We can now bring in Antonia Kerrigan, who joins us for more. Antonia, why is Paris doing this?
Well, they've made absolutely no bones about why they're doing this. So the agenda includes financing the protection of biodiversity, protecting our oceans, protecting our water resources and fighting desertification. No one's saying these things aren't important. Biodiversity and our oceans are essential regulators of the climate, but adverse climate events are caused by the burning of fossil fuels and policies such as drill baby drill. We know exactly who we're talking about there. And the French minister has said, we decided not to bring up the climate question head on, as the US position on this question is well known. So this is overt pandering to the known climate skeptic in the White House, who has even forbidden the word climate in his energy office. Reactions from the NGO community are very strong. Climate Action France had said avoiding the topic at the G7 illustrates the limit of current French leadership in this space. Ending fossil fuels is not an ideological option, but a strategic necessity. So very clear that climate change is not something we can skirt around.
Antonia, the G7 was formed in the wake of the 1973 oil crisis. Now we are currently dealing with an energy crisis given what's happening in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. How might things be different this time around?
Well, we are starting to get the sense that the pragmatic argument for fossil fuels may have begun to run its course. Fossil fuels no longer, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and with the current blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, fossil fuels no longer feel like they're a cheap or reliable option. The UK Energy Secretary put it quite nicely. He said it's time to get off the fossil fuel roller coaster. And amid that, the UK are looking, for instance, to weaken the link between gas prices and electricity prices, to take away this fossil fuel primacy and allow consumers to benefit from the progress that there has been in renewables. The EU also announced a plan yesterday, which is to increase electrification, shift energy use towards renewables and away from fossil fuels, as they attribute 24 billion euros of additional spending for fossil fuels since the outbreak of this current war in the Middle East. So they're acknowledging this is an extremely expensive habit. You're even hearing from the IMF, I mean, even before the current war, they released a report in December. They're not a radical anti-capitalist institution or anything like that, but they released a report in December saying fossil fuels were underpriced and overused. They say that the explicit and implicit subsidies of fossil fuels are just enormous and the environmental cost is grossly underestimated. So there is this growing critical mass of pragmatic voices making a very economic case against fossil fuels. That might be what's different from the 1970s.
And Antonia, tomorrow there's another major climate conference that kicks off in Colombia.
Yes, that's quite right. That's the Transitioning Away Conference. It's the first ever international summit devoted entirely to exiting fossil fuels. Of course, beware greenwashing. A climate conference does not equal climate action. But the participation of more than 50 countries may suggest that there is this widely held view that it's time to move away from fossil fuels and that transition isn't happening fast enough.
And going back to where we started in terms of fossil fuels and the shifting attitudes, but what's happening in the world's largest economy?
Well,
Drill, baby, drill. You mentioned it, so I'm guessing the attitudes haven't shifted.
Well, certainly the US president seems extremely confident about the future of fossil fuels. If I could show you a recent publication from earlier this month on social media, he said, we are the largest oil producer in the world. And so when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. So there are two different attitudes globally here. So right now, this may or may not be a turning point, but it's certainly a crossroads in terms of the future of fossil fuels.
Thank you very much for that, Antonia. Antonia Kerrigan there.